Captain Day stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, his eyes scanning the star charts displayed across the main screen. The ship hummed with quiet efficiency around him, a massive vessel of human engineering that had seen 3 years of patrol duty in the outer sectors. The crew moved through their routines with practiced ease, checking systems, monitoring communications, maintaining the constant vigilance that space travel demanded. Commander Hana sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she ran the daily weapons diagnostic. She had served with Day for 2 years now, and they had developed the kind of silent understanding that made good crews into great ones. The weapons were ready, as always. Humans built their ships expecting trouble. The communications console beeped. Lieutenant Gina looked up from her station, her expression shifting from routine boredom to focused attention. She pressed her earpiece tighter, her other hand moving rapidly across the controls to clean up the signal. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," she said. "It's coming from the Outer Traverse, Velen territory." Day turned toward her. "Put it through." The speakers crackled with static, and then a voice came through. It was high-pitched, trembling with fear, speaking in the common galactic language that most species used for trade and diplomacy. The words tumbled over each other in panic. "This is Station Keeper Velis of the Velen Republic, broadcasting on all emergency channels. We are under attack. Unknown hostile forces have breached our defensive perimeter. Our stations are being destroyed. We have 30 million civilians across 3 colony platforms. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We need—" The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by harsh static. Gina worked to recover the signal, but there was nothing. Just silence and the empty hiss of dead space. She looked at Day, her face pale. "That's all there is, sir. The signal terminated 4 minutes ago." Day's jaw tightened. He knew about the Velen. Everyone did. They were a gentle species, tall and slender, with bodies adapted to low-gravity worlds. They had hollow bones like birds, delicate frames that would shatter under Earth's crushing gravity. They were traders and artists, philosophers and mathematicians. They had no weapons worth mentioning, no military to speak of. They survived in the galaxy by being useful and unthreatening. "Time since the transmission originated?" Day asked. Gina checked her readings. 6 hours and 14 minutes, sir." 6 hours. Day's mind raced through the calculations. 6 hours of an ongoing attack. He pulled up the galactic map, highlighting the Velen territories. 3 stations orbiting a gas giant in a remote system, far from the major trade routes, far from the core worlds where the powerful species maintained their fleets. "Have any other ships responded to the distress call?" he asked. Gina checked the communication logs, scanning through the galactic emergency network. Her expression told him the answer before she spoke. "No, sir. No one has responded. No one has even acknowledged the signal." Hana turned in her chair, her eyes meeting Day's. "The Velen territories don't have anything valuable. No rare minerals, no strategic position. Most species probably think it's not worth the fuel costs to help them." Day felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. It was a feeling he had experienced before, a burning anger at the callous calculations that other species made. The galactic community liked to talk about civilization and cooperation, but when it came down to it, most of them only helped when there was profit involved. Humans were different. Maybe it was because Earth had been so harsh, so unforgiving. Maybe it was because humanity had learned that survival meant looking out for each other. Or maybe it was just that humans had a stubborn streak that refused to abandon those in need. "Open a channel to Earth Command," Day ordered. "Priority Alpha." It took 3 minutes for the quantum communication link to establish. Admiral Mina's face appeared on the screen, her expression sharp and alert despite the late hour in Earth's capital city. She was young for an admiral, only 42, but she had earned her rank in the border wars. Her dark eyes assessed Day immediately. "Captain Day, report." Day quickly summarized the situation: the distress call, the lack of response, the Velen's vulnerability. Mina listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When he finished, there was a long pause. Day could see the calculations running behind her eyes. The Iron Will was part of a small battle group, 3 ships total. They were days away from the nearest human outpost. If they jumped to the Velen system, they would be committing themselves to an unknown situation with unknown enemies. "What are you asking for, Captain?" Mina said quietly. "Permission to respond to the distress call, Admiral. Permission to take the battle group and render assistance." Another pause. Then Mina nodded slowly. "The Velen Republic has been a steady trading partner with Earth. They've never asked us for anything beyond fair commerce. If they're calling for help, they must be desperate." She straightened in her chair, her voice taking on the formal tone of official orders. "Captain Day, you are authorized to take the battle group and respond to the Velen distress call. You will have full discretion to engage hostile forces as necessary. The destroyer Relentless and the carrier Hammer Down will accompany you." "Understood, Admiral. We won't let them down." Mina's expression softened slightly. "I know you won't. That's why I'm sending you. Bring our people home safe, Captain." The screen went dark. Day turned to his crew, saw them already moving, already preparing. They had heard every word. They knew what was coming. "Hannah, send word to the Relentless and Hammer Down. We jump in 30 minutes. Combat protocols, full readiness." "Aye, sir." "Gina, calculate the fastest jump route to Velen space." "Already done, sir. 4 days if we push the engines." 4 days. Anything could happen in 4 days. The Velen might already be dead, their stations destroyed, their people scattered into the void. But there was a chance. A slim chance that the human fleet could arrive in time to make a difference. Lieutenant Tay's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Captain, I can give you more speed if you need it. I'll strip the safeties off the jump drive, run the reactor hot. We can cut 12 hours off that time." "Do it," Day ordered. "Every minute counts." The crew moved with renewed urgency. Across the 3 ships of the battle group, thousands of humans prepared for war. They checked their weapons, ran combat drills, studied everything the databases had on Velen space. They did not talk about the odds. They did not question whether it was worth risking human lives for an alien species most of them had never met. The Velen had called for help. That was enough. Captain Day stood at the observation window, watching the stars. In 30 minutes, they would jump into the unknown. They might be flying into a massacre. They might be outnumbered and outgunned. They might die far from Earth in a forgotten corner of space for people who could never repay the debt. But they would go. Because that was what humans did. When someone called for help, they answered. The jump countdown began. The Iron Will's engines built to a roar, and the human fleet leaped into the darkness, racing toward a desperate hope and an uncertain battle. The jump from normal space into slipspace always felt wrong to Day. His stomach twisted as the Iron Will punched through the fabric of reality, entering that strange twilight realm where the laws of physics bent and broke. 4 days of this, pushing the engines harder than they were meant to go, riding the edge of safety to gain every possible second. The crew barely slept. They ran constant drills, preparing for every scenario they could imagine. Hannah worked with the tactical teams, planning attack patterns and defensive formations. Ty practically lived in the engine room, nursing the overtaxed jump drive and making sure it did not tear itself apart. Gina monitored all frequencies, hoping for another transmission from the Velen, dreading the silence. On the 3rd day, Captain Yoon's face appeared on the communication screen. She commanded the carrier Hammer Down, a massive ship designed to launch and recover fighter squadrons. Her expression was grim. "Day, we need to talk about what we might find when we arrive." Day knew what she meant. They had all been thinking it, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Go ahead. If the attack started 6 hours before we received the signal, and it's been 4 days since then, the Velen might already be gone. All of them. I know. Then why are we burning out our engines to get there? Day was quiet for a moment. Because if there's even one survivor, one person still clinging to life in a damaged pod or a sealed compartment, they deserve to know that someone came, that someone cared enough to try. Yoon's stern expression softened. She nodded once. I'll have my pilots ready. The conversation ended. Day returned to his vigil, watching the bizarre swirls of slip space beyond the viewports. Somewhere ahead, in normal space, the Velen were waiting. Dead or alive, they were waiting. The 4th day arrived. The final jump sequence began. The entire fleet synchronized their exit from slip space, a complex maneuver that required perfect timing. Too early or too late, and they would arrive scattered across light years, vulnerable and alone. All ships report ready, Gina announced. Take us out, Day ordered. The iron will shuddered as it tore back into normal space. The view screens flickered, adjusting to the sudden return of natural light, and then everyone on the bridge went silent, staring at what lay before them. The Velen stations were gone, not just damaged or disabled, but shattered into pieces. Massive sections of hull tumbled slowly through space, trailing atmosphere and debris. Bodies floated among the wreckage, thousands of them, Velen civilians frozen in their final moments of terror. Entire decks had been torn open, exposing the delicate internal structures to the void. Dear God, Gina whispered. Hana's voice was tight with controlled fury. Scanning for survivors. I'm reading scattered life signs, emergency pods, sealed compartments, maybe a few thousand still alive. Out of 30 million. The number hit Day like a physical blow. 30 million souls, erased in less than a week. An entire civilization reduced to scattered refugees. Where are the attackers? He demanded. Hana's fingers flew across her console, and suddenly the tactical display lit up with hostile contacts. But they were not ships. Not in any conventional sense. The things on the scanner were massive, organic shapes that moved with predatory grace. They had armor that looked grown rather than built, weapons that pulsed with biological energy. Some were the size of destroyers, others larger than the iron will itself. And there were hundreds of them, spread across the Velen system like a swarm of insects. What am I looking at? Day asked. Bioships, Hana said, her voice filled with disbelief. Living vessels. The database has a partial match. They're called the Krathax. There's almost nothing in the records. Just legends. Most species think they're extinct. They're not extinct, Day said quietly. They're right here. And they just killed 30 million people. As if sensing the arrival of new prey, the nearest Krathax vessels began to turn toward the human fleet. They moved in disturbing waves, their organic hulls rippling as they adjusted course. A transmission came through, not in words, but in raw emotion projected directly into the minds of everyone who heard it. Hunger, dominance, the certainty of predators who had never met resistance. And then came a message in broken galactic common, as if the Krathax had learned just enough language to communicate their intentions. Surrender. Be consumed. Become part of the swarm. Resistance is waste. Day looked at the survivors scattered across the debris field. Thousands of Velen, huddled in failing pods, breathing the last of their air, waiting to die. He thought about the 30 million who were already gone, ripped apart by creatures who saw all other life as nothing but food. He opened the fleet-wide channel, his voice carrying to every human on every ship. All vessels, this is Captain Day. We came here to help the Velen. We're too late to save most of them, but we can still save thousands. We can still make sure those monsters pay for what they've done. He paused, letting that sink in. The Krothax think we're prey. They think we'll surrender like every other species they've encountered. They've never met humans before. They've never faced someone from Earth. On the tactical display, the Krothax were getting closer, their bioships accelerating with terrifying speed. There were so many of them. The humans were outnumbered 20-1, maybe more. All ships, combat formation, launch all fighters, prioritize the rescue of Velen survivors, but do not let those things get close to the pods. Weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten the innocent. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Hana brought the weapon systems online, targeting solutions flooding across her screens. Gina coordinated with the other ships, making sure everyone knew their role. Throughout the Iron Will, crew members raced to battle stations, securing hatches and powering up defensive shields. From the hammer down, fighters began to launch. Dozens of them, small and fast, piloted by men and women who had trained their entire lives for combat. Pilot Hyun led the first squadron, his voice calm over the radio as he gave orders. Pilot Nari took the second wave, her fighter screaming away from the carrier with reckless speed. The Krothax sent another wave of projected emotion. Amusement. They thought this was entertaining. 3 small ships, a handful of fighters, trying to resist a swarm that had conquered dozens of species. "Target the nearest cluster," Day ordered. "All batteries. Open fire." The Iron Will's main railguns spoke with a sound like thunder. Massive slugs of dense metal accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossing the distance to the Krothax in seconds. They hit the organic armor of the bioships and punched straight through, tearing enormous holes in the living tissue. The Krothax reeled, their amusement turning to shock. Nothing had hurt them like that before. Their armor was designed to absorb and distribute energy weapons, to heal from plasma burns and laser cuts. But kinetic weapons, solid metal moving at impossible speeds, were different. Hana watched her screens with fierce satisfaction. Direct hits were reading massive damage to their primary vessels. The destroyer Relentless added its fire to the barrage. Nuclear missiles streaked across space, each one carrying enough destructive power to level a city. They detonated inside the Krothax formations, and for a moment, space itself seemed to burn. But the Krothax were recovering from their surprise. They began to return fire, launching bioweapons that squirmed and twisted as they flew, acid projectiles that could eat through armor, living mines that sought out engine heat, swarms of smaller organisms that tried to attach themselves to human ships and burrow inside. "Evasive maneuvers," Day ordered. "Don't let those things touch us." The Iron Will banked hard, its massive frame responding with surprising agility. Point defense weapons tracked the incoming bioweapons, shooting them down in sprays of frozen organic matter. But there were so many. Some got through, splattering against the shields, beginning to eat through the energy barriers. In the debris field, rescue shuttles from all 3 human ships raced toward the Velen survivor pods. The pilots flew through deadly crossfire, dodging Krothax attacks and floating wreckage. They pulled Velen from dying pods, cramming them into every available space in the shuttles before racing back to the safety of the human carriers. Captain Yoon's voice came over the command channel. "Day, I'm reading a massive heat signature at the center of their formation. Something big, really big." Hana shifted the sensors, focusing on the coordinates Yoon had provided. And there it was. A Krothax vessel easily 10 times the size of the Iron Will, a monstrous thing that pulsed with sickening life. Bioorganic weapons bristled across its surface. Smaller ships clustered around it like pilot fish around a shark. "That's their command ship," Hana said. "It has to be. Look at the way the others are orienting to it." Day stared at the massive bioship. If they could take that thing down, maybe they could disrupt the entire Krothax fleet, but it was deep in their formation, protected by hundreds of smaller vessels. Getting to it would require flying through a wall of living weapons. "Yoon," How are the rescues going? We've recovered about 3,000 so far. There are more, but we need time. Time. The one thing they did not have. The Krathaks were adapting to human tactics, beginning to coordinate their attacks more effectively. The shields on the Relentless were down to 60%. The Iron Will had taken damage to its port side. They could not hold out forever. But they could buy time for the Velen. They could make sure every survivor made it to safety. And then, Day thought, staring at that massive command ship, they could make the Krathaks regret every single death they had caused. The battle had been raging for 2 hours, and the Krathaks were learning that humans did not break easily. Pilot Nari pulled her fighter through a spiral that would have liquefied the internal organs of most species. The G-forces crushed against her body, her flight suit struggling to keep blood flowing to her brain. But she had been born on Earth, where gravity pulled harder than most worlds, where the atmosphere was thick with oxygen that let muscles burn hot and fast. She had trained in conditions that would kill a Velen instantly. Her targeting computer locked onto a Krathak's destroyer analog, one of the medium-sized bioships that was harassing the rescue shuttles. She did not hesitate. Her finger pressed the trigger, and missiles streaked away from her fighter. They impacted along the creature's lateral line, punching deep into its organic armor before detonating. The bioship convulsed, venting atmosphere and biological fluids. It tried to regenerate, its flesh knitting together with disturbing speed. But Nari was already lining up her second shot. This time she aimed for what her sensors identified as a major nerve cluster. The missiles hit home, and the Krathak's vessel went limp, drifting dead in space. "Splash 1 destroyer," she reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Moving to assist the rescue operations." Pilot Hyun's squadron was engaged with a swarm of smaller Krathaks organisms, things the size of cars that moved like schools of fish. They latched onto ships and tried to bore through the hulls with acid secretions. Hyun led his fighters in close, using their point-defense lasers to burn the creatures off the rescue shuttles. "This is insane," one of his wingmen said over the radio. "There are too many of them." "Then we fight smarter," Hyun replied. He had studied the Krathaks' movements, watched how they responded to threats. They were coordinated, yes, but they followed patterns, biological patterns. Lead them toward each other. Make them cluster. The human fighters broke formation, scattering in different directions. The Krathaks organisms followed, just as Hyun had predicted, and when they had bunched together into a tight mass, the fighters wheeled around and opened fire. The explosions took out dozens of the creatures at once. On the Iron Will, Commander Hana watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The fighters were performing beyond expectations, but they could not keep this up forever. Sooner or later, exhaustion or ammunition shortages would catch up with them. "Captain, I've identified a weakness in the Krathaks formation," she said. "They're concentrating their larger vessels around that command ship, but it's left gaps in their defensive perimeter." Day studied the display. She was right. The Krathaks were protecting their leader, but in doing so, they had created openings that a smaller, faster ship could exploit. "We need to hit that command ship," Day said. "If we can take it out, maybe we can disrupt their entire swarm." "Sir, getting to it would require flying through the center of their fleet. We'd be taking fire from every direction." "I know." Hana met his eyes, understanding what he was asking. It was a suicide run. The Iron Will would be torn apart by concentrated Krathaks fire before it got within weapons range of the command ship. But if they did not try, the battle would turn into a slow grind of attrition that the humans would eventually lose. From the hammer down, Captain Yoon's voice cut through the command channel. "Day, I heard that plan. You're not doing it alone. The hammer down will provide covering fire. We'll draw off as many of them as we can." "Captain Yoon, your ship has most of the rescued Velen on board. You need to stay clear of the fighting. The Velen are secure in the interior compartments. And I didn't come all this way to watch you have all the fun. There was steel in Yoon's voice. Besides, you need someone to cover your approach. Accept the help, Day. Before Day could respond, the Relentless chimed in. This is Commander Sung of the Relentless. We're down to 40% shields, but our weapons are still operational. We'll take point on the assault. Our ship is smaller and faster than the Iron Will. We can break through. Day felt a surge of pride in his people. They all knew the odds. They all understood what they were risking, but not one of them was backing down. All ships, coordinate attack vectors. We go in together. Lieutenant Tay, I need every ounce of power you can give me. From engineering, Tay's response was immediate. I can reroute power from non-essential systems, life support in unoccupied sections, interior lighting, everything that's not weapons or engines. You'll have it, Captain. The 3 human ships began their approach, accelerating toward the heart of the Krithax swarm. The aliens noticed immediately. Bioships turned to intercept, launching waves of organic weapons. The space between the fleets lit up with fire and destruction. The Relentless lived up to its name, pushing forward with reckless determination. Its rail guns fired continuously, clearing a path through the smaller Krithax vessels. But the destroyer was taking enormous damage. Acid ate through its armor plating. Biomines attached to its hull and detonated, tearing gaping wounds in its structure. Relentless is losing structural integrity, Gina reported, her voice tight with worry. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Keep going, Commander Sung's voice came through, broken by static. We're almost through. The hammer down followed close behind, its massive bulk absorbing fire meant for the smaller ships. Captain Yoon had ordered all fighters to dock, pulling them back to protect the carrier's fighter bays. Now the carrier's own weapons spoke, heavy plasma cannons that carved through Krithax bioships with searing heat. And the Iron Will came last, using the other 2 ships as shields while it advanced. Day stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the command chair's arms, watching his fleet push deeper into enemy territory. They were past the outer perimeter now, past the point of no return. The Krithax command ship loomed ahead, massive and terrible. Up close, Day could see that it was not just a ship but a living ecosystem, a monster that had grown over centuries into a weapon of conquest. Smaller organisms crawled across its surface like insects. Weapons that looked like organic cannons tracked the approaching human vessels. Target the command ship, Day ordered. All weapons, maximum rate of fire. Don't give it time to regenerate. The Iron Will's rail guns opened up, hammering the command ship with kinetic rounds. Each impact tore away chunks of organic matter, exposing the vulnerable interior. Nuclear missiles followed, detonating deep inside the wounds, burning the creature from within. The command ship screamed. Not with sound, but with a psychic wail that echoed in the minds of every human in the fleet. It was pain and rage and disbelief. The Krithax had never been hurt like this. They had never faced prey that fought back with such ferocity. Keep firing, Day commanded. Don't let up. But the Krithax were not finished. The smaller bioships swarmed around the human fleet, attacking from all sides. The Relentless shuddered under the assault, its shields finally collapsing completely. Bioweapons struck its bare hull, melting through armor, venting atmosphere into space. Relentless is going down, Hana said, her voice filled with horror. On the view screen, they watched as the destroyer listed to one side, trailing debris and bodies. Emergency pods began to eject, small lifeboats carrying the surviving crew away from the dying ship. But even in its death throes, the Relentless kept firing, its automated weapons systems continuing the fight until the very end. A massive Krithax cruiser moved in to finish the destroyer, and the Relentless's captain made one final choice. The ship's reactor went critical, overloading in a deliberate cascade. The resulting explosion consumed both the destroyer and the Krethax vessel, a funeral pyre that lit up the battlefield. "Count the pods," Day ordered. "Make sure we recover every single one." "Aye, sir." The loss of the Relentless bought them precious seconds. The Iron Will and the Hammer Down concentrated their fire on the command ship, pouring everything they had into the massive bioform. Explosions rippled across its surface. Entire sections of its organic armor peeled away, revealing the pulsing organs beneath. Hana pulled up a detailed scan. "Captain, I'm reading a central structure deep inside the command ship. It's heavily shielded, but our scans suggest it's some kind of neural center. If we can destroy that, we might be able to kill this thing." "How do we reach it? Our weapons can't penetrate that deep." Hana was quiet for a moment, running calculations. Then she looked at Day, and he saw in her eyes what she was about to propose. "We board it. Marines with heavy explosives fighting their way to the center. It's the only way." Day knew she was right. He also knew that anyone who went into that nightmare ship would probably never come back out. The Krethax command vessel was a living horror, filled with biological defenses that would make a boarding operation almost impossible. He opened the ship-wide channel. "This is Captain Day. I need volunteers for a boarding mission. I won't lie to you. This will be the most dangerous operation any of you have ever attempted. We're going into the heart of that creature, and we might not make it back. But if we succeed, we can end this battle and save the Velen survivors." There was a pause, and then Sergeant Kang's voice came through from the Marine quarters. "Sir, my entire platoon is volunteering. We're ready to go." More voices chimed in, engineers who wanted to help plant the explosives, medics who refused to let the Marines go alone. Within minutes, Day had more volunteers than he could use. "Sergeant Kang, select your best team, take the equipment you need, and Kang, make it count." "We will, sir. For the Velen, for the Relentless, for everyone these monsters have killed." The boarding craft launched from the Iron Will's hangar, a small shuttle racing toward the wounded command ship. Inside, 30 human Marines checked their weapons and said silent prayers. They were flying into hell, and they knew it. But they were also humans, children of Earth, Deathworlders who had evolved to survive in a nightmare and turned themselves into the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Krethax were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The boarding craft punched through the outer membrane of the Krethax command ship. And Sergeant Kang immediately knew they had entered something that should not exist. The walls around them were not metal or composite, but living tissue that pulsed with a sick rhythm. The air was thick and humid, carrying smells that made his stomach turn. Somewhere in the distance, something that might have been breathing echoed through corridors that looked more like arteries than hallways. "Seal your suits," Kang ordered. "Don't breathe this air. Don't touch the walls. Don't trust anything you see." The 30 Marines moved out in tight formation, their weapons raised and ready. Each of them carried enough firepower to level a building. Plasma rifles, explosive charges, flamethrowers designed to burn through organic material. They had trained for boarding operations on enemy ships, but nothing could have prepared them for this. The corridor ahead split into 3 directions. Kang checked his scanner, trying to locate the central neural structure that Hana had identified. The device flickered and died, overwhelmed by the biological interference inside the ship. "Equipment's useless in here," he said. "We navigate by instinct. Follow the largest passages. The command center has to be deep inside, and these corridors should lead there." They moved forward, and that was when the Krethax ship began to fight back. The walls suddenly constricted, trying to crush the Marines between folds of organic matter. Kang's team responded instantly, their flamethrowers turning the living corridor into an inferno. The flesh recoiled, pulling back with what sounded almost like a scream. The smell of burning organic matter filled the air even through their sealed suits. "Keep moving," Kang ordered. "Don't give it time to adapt." They ran down the burning corridor, boots splashing through fluids that leaked from the damaged walls. Behind them, the passage was already beginning to regenerate, new tissue growing to replace what had been burned away. This ship could heal itself faster than they could damage it. A side passage erupted with movement. Krithak's warrior organisms burst out, things that walked on multiple legs and had weapons that were part of their bodies. They fired bioacid that sizzled against the Marines' armor. One of Kang's soldiers went down, his suit breached, the acid eating through to the flesh beneath. The Marines returned fire. Plasma bolts burned through the warriors, explosive rounds tore them apart, but more kept coming. An endless swarm pouring from chambers and passages that seemed to multiply as they fought. "Grenades!" Kang ordered. High explosive charges flew down the corridor, detonating in the midst of the Krithak's warriors. The explosions tore through organic flesh and shattered the delicate structures of the corridor itself. Entire sections collapsed, sealing off the passages the creatures were using to flank them. But they had lost 3 Marines in that exchange. 27 left. They pushed deeper. The corridors grew larger, more complex. They were entering regions of the command ship that seemed to serve different functions. One chamber was filled with what looked like incubation pods, thousands of them, growing new Krithak's organisms. Kang ordered it burned. The flames consumed everything, and the ship itself seemed to shudder with pain. Another chamber held what might have been a digestive system, vast pools of acid, where the remains of consumed prey were being broken down. Kang saw fragments of Velen bodies floating in the pools and felt his rage spike hotter than the flames his team carried. "Plant charges on everything," he said. "When we blow the central core, I want this entire nightmare to go with it." They moved like ghosts through the dying ship, leaving destruction in their wake. The Krithaks tried everything to stop them. The corridors filled with toxic gas that the Marines' filters strained to handle. Living mines attached themselves to their armor and had to be cut away before they detonated. The walls themselves tried to absorb the Marines, pulling them into folds of flesh that attempted to digest them alive. But humans were stubborn. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day, where predators hunted them and diseases ravaged them, and the environment itself was hostile. They had learned to fight back against everything the universe threw at them. 27 became 23, then 20. Each loss was a name, a face, a friend. But they kept moving. And then they found it. The chamber opened before them like a cathedral, a vast space that extended up and down beyond the range of their lights. And in the center, suspended by thousands of organic cables, hung the neural core. It was massive, easily the size of a house, a pulsing mass of brain tissue that glowed with a faint bioluminescence. This was the mind of the command ship, the intelligence that coordinated the entire Krithak swarm. It noticed them immediately, and it spoke. Not with words, but with thoughts pushed directly into their minds. Images and emotions and concepts that bypassed language entirely. Kang felt it trying to understand what they were, these small creatures that had fought their way into its heart. The Krithak's consciousness was ancient. It had been alive for thousands of years, consuming entire species, adding their biomass to the swarm. It had never known fear. It had never known defeat. To the Krithaks, all other life existed only to be absorbed and converted into more of itself. But now, for the first time, it felt something new. It felt uncertainty. These humans, these strange creatures from a world it had never heard of, they were not behaving like prey. They were behaving like predators. The neural core tried to bargain. It offered Kang power, promised to merge his consciousness with the swarm, to make him immortal. It showed him visions of the galaxy conquered, every species united under Krithak's control, an empire that would last until the stars themselves burned out. Kang's response was to raise his plasma rifle and fire. The shot burned into the neural tissue, and the entire ship convulsed. The Krithak's consciousness recoiled, shocked that these creatures would reject its offer. It tried threats instead, showing them images of horrible deaths, of their bodies being dissolved and absorbed, of their homeworld being consumed by the swarm. "We've seen worse," Kang said aloud. "You should see what Earth throws at us on a daily basis. Compared to home, you're just another Tuesday." His Marines spread out around the chamber, placing the heavy explosives they had carried all this way. Nuclear charges, each one powerful enough to vaporize a city block. They wired them together, creating a network that would ensure total destruction when it detonated. The Krithak's neural core made one final attempt. It called for help, sending out a psychic scream that summoned every warrior organism in the ship. The corridors behind the Marines filled with the sound of approaching monsters, hundreds of them, rushing to defend their core. "How long until the charges are ready?" Kang asked. 2 minutes, Sergeant. Make it 1. The Marines worked with practiced efficiency, their hands steady even as the sounds of approaching enemies grew louder. They had done their job. They had reached the target. Now all that mattered was making sure the explosion happened. The first Krithak's warriors appeared at the chamber entrance. Kang and 5 of his Marines formed a defensive line, their weapons creating a wall of fire that the creatures had to cross. The warriors came anyway, driven by the neural core's desperate commands, dying by the dozens as they tried to reach the humans. "Charge is set," one of the Marines called out. 30-second timer." Kang looked around the chamber, counting his remaining people. 15 Marines left. Not enough to fight their way back through the ship. Probably not enough to survive the next 30 seconds of fighting. "Activate the timer," he ordered. "Everyone behind cover. Seal your suits completely." The countdown began. 20 seconds. The Krithak's warriors redoubled their assault, somehow sensing that time was running out. 15 seconds. A warrior broke through the defensive line, its claws tearing through one Marine's armor before it was gunned down. 10 seconds. Kang saw the chamber entrance beginning to seal, the ship trying to close off the neural core to protect it. Too late. 5 seconds. The Marines huddled behind whatever cover they could find, pressing themselves against the organic walls that might shield them from the blast. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1. The nuclear charges detonated simultaneously. The explosion was contained within the chamber, shaped by the charge's placement to direct all its force inward toward the neural core. The fireball consumed everything, vaporizing the brain tissue, severing the thousands of connections that linked the core to the rest of the ship. The blast wave hit Kang like a hammer, throwing him against the wall. His armor cracked, his visor shattered. He felt ribs break, tasted blood in his mouth. Around him, he could hear the screams of his Marines, those who had survived the initial explosion. But through his damaged helmet, he could also hear something else: the sound of the ship dying. Without its neural core, the Krithak's command vessel lost all coordination. Its biological systems began to fail, one after another. The walls stopped moving. The warrior organisms collapsed, their connection to the hive mind severed. Throughout the massive bioship, vital processes simply stopped. Kang struggled to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He counted 8 other Marines still moving, 8 out of 30. The rest were dead or too injured to move. "Can anyone hear me?" he called into his damaged radio. "This is Sergeant Kang. The neural core is destroyed. We need immediate extraction. We have wounded." Static answered him. The explosion had probably damaged his communications equipment, or maybe the iron will was too far away, or maybe the ship had been destroyed while they were fighting inside this nightmare. "We walk," he said to the surviving Marines. "Follow the destroyed corridors back to where we entered. If we have to crawl, we crawl. But we're getting off this ship." The journey back was a blur of pain and determination. The ship was dying around them, its passages collapsing, its systems failing. But it was also no longer fighting them. The defensive mechanisms had stopped. The warrior organisms were inert. Kang led his battered squad through the ruins, retracing their path through memory and instinct. They pulled their wounded along, refusing to leave anyone behind. That was the human way. You brought your people home, living or dead. After what felt like hours, they saw light ahead. Real light, not the sick bioluminescence of the Kruthax ship. The hole their boarding craft had made was still there, torn open and leading to blessed empty space beyond. And waiting just outside, battered and damaged but still flying, was a rescue shuttle from the Iron Will. Pilot Nari's voice came crackling over the emergency channel. "I see you, Sergeant. Coming in for pickup. And Kang? The captain says you're a crazy bastard, but it worked. The Kruthax fleet is in chaos. We're winning." The Kruthax command ship died slowly, like a wounded animal. Kang and his surviving Marines watched from the rescue shuttle as the massive biovessel shuddered and convulsed. Internal explosions rippled through its structure, secondary detonations as vital systems failed and organic reactors went critical. The thing that had coordinated the death of 30 million Velen was tearing itself apart. Pilot Nari flew the shuttle with smooth precision despite the damage to her craft. She had been fighting for hours, her fighter damaged in a dozen places, but when the call came for an emergency extraction, she had not hesitated. That was what humans did. They came for their people. "Sergeant, you look like hell," she said, glancing back at the bloodied Marines. Kang managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "You should see the other guy." The shuttle docked with the Iron Will, and medical teams were waiting. They pulled the wounded Marines out carefully, rushing them to the medical bay. Kang refused treatment until his people were cared for, standing in the hangar with broken ribs and burns covering half his body, while he made sure every single survivor was accounted for. Captain Day appeared at the hangar entrance. He looked exhausted, his uniform stained with sweat and smoke, but his eyes were alive with fierce pride. "You did it, Sergeant. The command ship is down, and the rest of their fleet is falling apart." 22 dead, sir," Kang said quietly. 22 good people who won't be going home. I know, and will honor every single one of them. But because of what you did, thousands of Velen are going to survive. The Kruthax are broken. On the bridge, Commander Hana watched the tactical display with something close to awe. The moment the command ship's neural core had been destroyed, the Kruthax biofleet had lost all coordination. The individual ships were still dangerous, still armed and aggressive, but they no longer fought as a unified swarm. They attacked each other as often as they attacked the humans, their primitive individual intelligences unable to distinguish friend from foe without the guiding consciousness of the command ship. The human fleet exploited the chaos ruthlessly. The Iron Will and the Hammer Down moved through the confused Kruthax formations like wolves among sheep, their weapons finding targets with every shot. Pilot Hyun's fighter squadron harried the smaller bioships, preventing them from regrouping. "Captain," Hana reported, "the Kruthax are beginning to retreat. Those that can still navigate are trying to jump away." Day's expression was hard. "Don't let them. If even one of these things escapes, it could rebuild a swarm somewhere else. Hunt them down, all of them." It was not mercy. It was not even revenge, though that was part of it. It was simple, tactical reality. The Kruthax had shown what they were, a species that existed only to consume others. They had no diplomacy, no capacity for coexistence. They were a plague, and plagues had to be eradicated completely or they would return. The battle continued for another 3 hours. It was methodical, brutal work. The human ships tracked down every Krethax vessel, giving no quarter and accepting no surrender. Nuclear weapons turned bio-ships into expanding clouds of vaporized organic matter. Railguns punched through living armor until nothing remained but debris. Captain Yoon's voice came over the command channel. "Day! We're reading 0 active Krethax signatures. I think they're all gone." Hana ran a full sensor sweep, checking and rechecking the results. "Confirmed, Captain. No living Krethax vessels detected in the system. No lifeboats, no escape pods, no survivors." The bridge was silent for a long moment. They had won. Against impossible odds, outnumbered 20-1, the human fleet had destroyed an entire Krethax swarm. But the victory felt hollow when Day thought about the cost. The Relentless was gone, its crew scattered in rescue pods. The Iron Will had lost 200 personnel in the fighting. The Hammer Down was barely holding together, its hull breached in a dozen places. And 30 million Velen were still dead, their lives snuffed out before help could arrive. "Begin recovery operations," Day ordered. "I want every escape pod collected, every survivor accounted for. Rescue teams to the Velen pods first, then our own people." The work took 12 hours. Shuttles flew through the debris field, searching for life signs among the wreckage. They found Velen, who had been floating in failing pods for days, their air nearly gone, their hope all but extinguished. They found human sailors from the Relentless, alive against all odds in the cold darkness of space. Lieutenant Gina coordinated the massive rescue effort, her voice calm and steady as she directed traffic and prioritized the most critical cases. She had been on duty for 18 straight hours, but like everyone else on the human ships, she refused to rest while there were still people to save. By the time the last survivor was pulled from the debris, the count stood at 6,214 Velen rescued, out of 30 million. The number was devastating, but it was also 6,000 lives that would have been lost if the humans had not come. Admiral Mina's face appeared on the communication screen, transmitted from Earth across light years of space. She looked at the battle damage, at the casualty reports, at the exhausted faces of the surviving crew. "Captain Day, I need your final report on the engagement." Day straightened, though his body ached with every movement. "Admiral, the human fleet responded to the Velen distress call as ordered. We arrived to find 3 colony stations destroyed and approximately 30 million Velen civilians dead. The attacking force was identified as the Krethax, a bioship species previously thought to be extinct or mythological." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We engaged the Krethax fleet and, after heavy fighting, destroyed their command ship through a boarding operation. This disrupted their coordination and allowed us to eliminate the remaining hostile vessels. We suffered significant casualties. The destroyer Relentless was lost with all hands not evacuated in time. The Iron Will and Hammer Down sustained heavy damage. Total human casualties, 412 dead, 837 wounded." "And the enemy casualties?" Day's voice was flat. "Total, Admiral. No Krethax ships survived the engagement. No escape pods detected. No biological signatures remaining. We hunted down every single one of them." There was a long silence. Then Mina nodded slowly. "Understood. And the Velen survivors?" 6,214 rescued and currently being housed aboard our ships. We're providing medical care and supplies. They've lost everything, Admiral, their homes, their families, their entire civilization. "We'll find places for them," Mina said. "Earth will take as many as want to come. We'll help them rebuild." The transmission ended, but not before Day saw the look in Mina's eyes. Pride and sorrow mixed together, the weight of command that came from sending people into battle and watching them die. In the medical bay, Sergeant Kong sat with the surviving members of his boarding team. They were bandaged and broken, but alive. One of the younger Marines, a woman named Jin, who had lost her best friend in the command ship, looked up at him. "Sergeant, was it worth it? All those people we lost?" Kang thought about the question carefully. He thought about the 22 Marines who had died under his command. He thought about the crew of the Relentless, vaporized in the explosion that took out a Krethax cruiser. He thought about all the human lives spent in this battle. Then he thought about the 6,000 Velen survivors, the families that would live because humans had chosen to help. He thought about all the future species who would never face the Krethax because the swarm had been destroyed here and now. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It was worth it." 3 days later, the damaged human fleet began the long journey back to Earth. The Velen survivors came with them, refugees now, but alive. They spoke in hushed tones about what they had witnessed, about the humans who had arrived like avenging angels and destroyed an enemy that had seemed invincible. The galaxy would hear the story. The Velen made sure of that. They broadcast the battle recordings, the sensor logs, everything that showed what the human fleet had done. Other species watched in disbelief as 3 human ships took on a Krethax swarm and won. The title that emerged from those broadcasts was simple and direct. The Deathworlders' fleet responded to the alien SOS. No one survived. Some species misunderstood it at first, thinking it meant the humans had all died in the battle, but the Velen corrected them quickly. No one survived. No enemy survived. The Krethax, the monsters that had haunted the outer sectors for generations, the nightmare species that consumed entire civilizations, had been completely eradicated by 3 human ships. In the quiet of his quarters, Captain Day reviewed the casualty lists one more time. Every name, every face, he would remember them all. They had died doing what humans did best, protecting those who could not protect themselves, standing between the innocent and the darkness, refusing to back down even when the odds were impossible. Lieutenant Gina brought him a message from the Velen survivors. It was simple, written in their flowing script and translated into human language. "To the humans who came when no one else would, we can never repay what you have done for us. You lost so much to save so few. But know that every Velen child who grows up because of your sacrifice will hear your names. We will remember. Forever." Day read the message twice, then saved it to his personal files. He would add it to the memorial they would build for the fallen, so that everyone would know why those 412 people had died. The Iron Will limped through space, its engines straining, its hull patched with temporary repairs. But it flew with its head high, because it had done what it set out to do. The Velen had called for help, and the humans had answered. Some species in the galaxy valued profit over compassion, strategy over morality, their own safety over the lives of others, but not humans. Humans were different. They came from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years, and they had survived by learning one critical lesson. You protect your own. And you never, ever abandon those who ask for help. The Krethax had learned that lesson too, in the final moments before their extinction. They had learned what happened when you threatened the innocent while Deathworlders were watching. No one survived, no enemy survived, and the galaxy would never forget.